Hey everybody, it's Flake again for Team Rankstar. I got another deck that I want you guys to try. Now, not tier 1 necessarily, but it's popping up here and there, and I've seen a few people ask about it in terms of, is Francesca viable, Francesca weather, this, that, you know, with Roog and such. So here it is. Here's my version of it. I've been playing it on ladder, had some success. It's fun, and a lot of the times your opponent either does not see part of the deck coming, like the Roog, or tossing in a couple spicy Scorches for some round 3 victories. So I will show you around the Francesca deck and give you a little walkthrough, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. All right, so the deck is pretty much banking on the fact that Francesca is going to pop off in round 3. That's when you maximize the high spell value, whether it be double Roog, double Scorch. Doesn't matter either way. There's plenty of opportunities, depending on what the scenario is and what you're playing against, to really use her ability to get some really late game, big time value plays and win round 3. So we're going to cruise through the deck, and I'll explain to you my choices for the cards that I chose. And starting with the bronzes, again, value plays, value cards. We'll just cruise through these real quick. I don't want to waste too much time because I think you all know by now the importance of low provision cost cards, because they allow you to, if you can get the right value for them, and you can kind of economize on cheaper stuff like the 4 and 5 provision cards, allows you to pack in a lot more punch later on, especially in the spells category with like Scorch and Royal Decree, etc. All right, so 1 Blue Mountain Elite. Now, the reason why I put 1 and not 2 is because oftentimes I found myself regretting having kept this card, because with cards, with your opponent filling rows, this card only really has, an effect if the opponent has less cards in play, or sorry, only one unit on a row. The 4 damage that it does is great control, get rid of stuff with orders, get rid of cards that might cause you trouble. But the problem is that once 2 cards come down, you're kind of SOL, so to speak. Early on against Nilfgaard with a Magni Division or a Nausicaa Sergeant, sure, it's great, slam it down, destroy it, it's all good. But later on I find that you're kind of struggling to play this card in a valuable spot, or in a spot that really gives it a little bit more oomph. You're going to kind of be regretting not using it earlier, but then again, if your opponent doesn't necessarily drop something that is too juicy for us to use on, you're going to get stuck with it. So I put 1 instead of 2. It still has its uses though. Furthermore, the Sword Master. Now the Sword Master is there to pretty much eat locks early and such. That's all it tends to do. You slam it down, and if they have no answer for it, it can really pop off and snowball for value. But a lot of the times it's going to eat a lock. The 3 strength on it isn't necessarily making it too resilient to opponent removal. So just dump it. I'm always a proponent of, if you're going to play in fear of your opponent's locks and such, then it's just going to hurt you down the road. So play this early. If they have an answer, well, they have an answer. If not, great. Then you've just, absorbed a lock or removal that might hurt you late game. So 2 of these guys for 4 provision. Many times this is, turned into 8-9 value for me. Now, the Vrya Dragoon is important. This card 2 times is very, very, very important. Now, what does this do? Well, there's a lot of cards that your opponent will play that has implications based on the row it's on. Things like Eskel being on the melee row, or the Magni Division sitting alone on a row growing. This will just nullify that. So at the very least, even if you're not popping off for weather on a particular row, this card will be good for disrupting strategies. It also is going to be good for many other things. For instance, the Vrya Dragoon moving your opponent's units is going to have implications with Lacerate, lining up the rows for getting some extra value on Lacerate. At the same time, continuously slamming a unit into their Roog row, that is super important. Now we'll get to these right now, might as well, since we're talking about them. But Roog is very important. This is kind of the key piece to the strategy. I was playing around with really saving Roog and playing double Roog in a late round, but it's all going to depend depending on what you're playing against. Typically I find against point slam, things like Reveal, Nilfgaard, or Woodland Spirit monsters, you kind of want to drop this in round 1 and get the value where you can. You can always replay it with Francesca late game, but this is going to snowball. A lot of the times those decks like to go 5, 6, 7 turns into a round. So what you want to do is make sure that this card gets its value, gets its actual worth, because this for 3 turns or 4 turns is not going to get you any value. You want to make sure that you play this when you can. Now your opponent is likely going to you know, play around it, and that's fine, because that's where we have cards like the Vrya Dragoon right here to push things back into it. And it has cards like Lacerate, where if they want to avoid the weather, they'll be stacking 1 row, and you just swipe it for a lot of value over here. You know, Golden Froth is now, what, 12 or 13 provision, and it just adds 2 to their whole row. Well, on the other side of the coin, friends, is that this only costs 7 and does the complete opposite and gets you a whole bunch of points right there. We'll continue onward here. The Vryhead Soldier is really, the Vryhead Officer is really good, and I really kind of overlooked this for a while, because for 5 provision, 2 base points doesn't seem like a lot, but damaging an enemy by 3 is important, because there's a lot of opponent units that have 3 strength that you can just wipe off the board. Not to mention protecting your Elven Swordmaster is also pretty important too. If they, let's say, if they use an Arbalest and only manage to hit it for 1, this guy will be at 1 strength. You can kind of go ahead and bust him up and you know, beef him up with your Vryhead Officer with the boost an ally by 3. Sometimes those extra points really make sense. You don't want to be damaging an enemy by 3 that's sitting in Roog if it's just going to get the value, if the damage is going to happen anyways, right? So that's a good card to have for the cost. The Bowman, 2 of these guys, not all that special. This is a card that if ever I'm in a round that doesn't matter and I just need to dump cards, this is the first one I get rid of. The 3 damage from full range is okay, but the other cool part about this is that you can kind of tailor the amount of damage it does. So if you need to get creative and tailor a Scorch to hit 2 units, you can use this. But at the same time, you can max value this at 6 for 5 provision. There's nothing wrong there. Again, cheap cards, you need to find the value where they are. Now the Vryhead Sapper is purely because, even though artifacts are not as proficient in the game anymore, not as prominent, they still do appear, and I wasn't going to waste a big expensive slot for something like Frenzied Dow to kill one when I can just get it done with this guy relatively easily. Not to mention, if you don't suspect there's going to be artifacts coming in, go ahead and just drop this, and you know, in a round that doesn't matter when you have to just dump some cards to go into round 3. Okay, moving on, the Dolbathan Archer. Now, this is purely to line up Scorches, I find. So you can be okay with using this to sort of crush units that need to die, smaller bronze cards that are problematic. Dump this if you just want to bleed. Not the most important cards, but that 1 damage can actually get some value in round 3 when you're double scorching or whatnot. So another great card over here. Kind of, I like the ability that on the range row it damages 2 units, not enemy units. So let's say for some weird reason they drop you know, a cow carcass on you, you can kill it. At the same time, killing 2 Neckers that might grow out of control, easy. Or if you're in some weird world you're playing against an Arrakis Queen, you can go ahead and kill some of those little drones with it as well. So a versatile card. And Mahakmael is becoming a little bit more important. Now the 4 buff for 5 is all good, but the removal of the lock is also important. Now I put this in here because a lot of people play locks. There's no secret there. So you need to be playing this to, you know, kind of help you out against cards that will lock your, where is it? There it is, your Swordmaster. Just saving this, if they bust a lockdown on it and they just flat out, you know, cold clock lock it, you can just open it back up with the Ale, not lose too much tempo, because the 4 points will help you out. Keep it alive, keep it buffed up. Good to go over there. Again, we already saw Lacerate, and we know why, because they're probably going to be stacking rows, given the fact that we have Roog slamming down on one of them. And here it is, the Mastercraft Spear. Now, a lot of people have sort of turned away from artifacts because of the fact that, you know, they become more expensive and such, and nothing wrong there. I mean, yeah, 7 provision when they used to be 5. That's 2 extra provision. That's 4 cost if you want to play a pair. that could be used anywhere else. And I like them because it fits in with what the strategy of this deck is. The deck strategy early on is pretty much to drop points, be competitive, use those big spells early to get ahead, and then in the late rounds, in round 3, you want to be making big time plays by playing cards that don't necessarily matter too much, or cards that aren't vulnerable to your opponent's removal. Artifacts are typically not too vulnerable. You're kind of in that space where not many people are playing artifacts, so they're not playing too much artifact removal, so you could get lucky and just have the Mastercraft Spear. Again, 7 cost, but it does do work, trust me. I've had a lot of this card has helped me a lot and really helped keep the board at bay. Finally, let's go on to the obvious choice, which is your Triple Witcher. Now, what does this do? Well, there's no surprise here. Everybody plays this, and there's a reason everybody plays this, is because for the combined cost and the thinning and the 12-point play, it is just silly not to include these cards unless you really need the extra pieces over there. 21 provision for 12 points seems crazy, but let's think about it. You're also thinning your deck, and 12 points, there's not many other cards that can compete with that straight out of the gate. So you're going to be using your mulligans to make sure that this is fine, but it's okay, don't worry about it. There are other ways to get cards out of your deck, things like Royal Decree, Francesca, etc. So don't be too worried if you have to mulligan, if this is, because Francesca doesn't only has 2 mulligans, but you'll 9 out of 10 times you'll be fine. But you can't, I'm not going to dive too deep into the Witchers, but that's a whole other conversation. But for the thinning and the value, they are insta-locks. They're probably the first cards you should put in every single deck that has 2 or more mulligans. Just be completely honest here. It is too obscenely important to have these cards in there. Because if your opponent plays the Witchers and you don't, you're already pretty much toast. Roach is the obvious add-on to that. Don't need to go into there. Your early plays are typically just dropping the Witchers and Roach and going. I like to actually hold on to the Witcher play if I have it to steal around, play 5-6 cards deep into a round in round 1, and if your opponent doesn't suspect that you have it, then you drop it for 16 points. Sometimes they just completely forget that you're playing them, which is weird. All right, Royal Decree, simple. Go out and get things like Synthesis Blaze. Go out and get things that you need. You absolutely need. Sometimes you need a 1-point or a spot removal like Blue Mountain Elite, or you need the Vryhead Dragoon to move something into Weather. Trust me, it might seem weird to play Royal Decree just to go pull out a bronze card, but if it's putting something in Roog that's going to tick for 4 turns, that's exceptionally important because that becomes a 12-point play that way. So Royal Decree, I played it without Royal Decree, and I found that it's important to have in there because even if you have to play it with Francesca twice, it's going to help out. Now, Scorch. There's a lot of decks that go tall now. Woodland Spirit is one. There's a lot of decks that will put units on the board that are 12, 13, 14 strength. This is your answer, along with spears. Along with your various, sources of 1 damage here and there. This is going to get you some value. Promise you. I've played this enough times, this deck enough times, and successfully so, where Scorch has popped off in late rounds, where I've pretty much gone Scorch, Francesca Scorch, and rid the board of 30 some odd points as a last play. I like to hang on to this card. I don't like to tip it off to my opponent because in round 3, if they know you have Scorch in the bank with Francesca, typically they'll play around it. But if you hold on to Scorch as your last play, they'll never know what's happening, and Francesca hitting twice with Scorch, along with the help of 1 Synthesis Blaze, tailoring down 5 spot shots with the 5 charges of 1 damage, that can again just really change the game entirely. So this is the list right here that I've been playing. Again, in terms of a basic strategy, don't be afraid to push hard in round 1. If you can hang on to Francesca and something like double Scorch or double Roog or whatever, or double Lacerate even in the late rounds, depending on what they play, you'll get the hang of it. Again, you're not going to go to Grandmaster with this deck necessarily, and it's very meta dependent because, if they're playing a very control-y type deck, where they're not really keeping any points on the board, you could be in a problem. But you should have enough to go on here to really make it happen. But just be your resources are fairly limited, you know. But there's a lot of utility with Francesca, whether it's playing Roog twice, playing Scorch twice, you know, or even just playing Roog on one row and then having them stack the other row and lacerating twice. That is an immense amount of points that can really win you the game, especially when a lot of decks play all 3 Witchers with Roach and then end up stacking a row. You should have some value on all of these. So I really hope you enjoy this deck. If you have any questions, as always, but I've played it with other spells. I've played it with Alzur's Thunder. I've played it with other things like Dimeridium Shackles, but I think that this was the best build. And I almost forgot Karen. So Karen gets double the value because you lock a unit and move it. So you want to be moving stuff and putting them from one row to another, tossing them back into Roog or lining them up for Lacerate. Plus you get the added bonus of a lock. So easy peasy. There you go. There she is, Francesca in all her glory. Enjoy that. Well, there it is. And as always, I always welcome your comments and questions and suggestions and your own experiences. If you like the deck, if you don't like the deck, if you've seen it in action, if you try it yourself, please give me all the comments. You can go ahead and do that right here on this channel. Drop your comments or always tweet at me. You can do that as well at WatchFlake on Twitter or twitch.tv/WatchFlake. You can get more content at www.teamrankstar.com. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with this deck. A lot of people saying that Francesca might not be viable in current strategies. There are better decks for sure, but I thought I found a nice sweet spot that has beaten a lot of big decks, especially when you're packing Scorch. A lot of people are not suspecting it. Not a lot of people are playing Weather Clear. Like almost nobody is playing Weather Clear, but a lot of people are starting to suspect that Roog might be a sleeper card. So get it while it's hot, as they say. Anywho, I'm Flake for Team Rankstar. Again, I welcome all your comments, questions, and suggestions. Reach out to me, and I'll be happy to interact and talk to you about it. So be kind to one another, and I will see you very soon. Adios.